Before we begin, I need you to imagine this: a room filled with diamonds, silk gowns, and men who believe they own the world, and in the center of it all, a billionaire laughing at a waitress he calls nobody. What he doesn't know is that within weeks, that same nobody will reduce his empire to ashes without ever raising her voice. Stay with me until the end, because this story will challenge everything you think you know about power, pride, and revenge. And if stories about strength rising from humiliation inspire you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because this one will stay with you long after it ends. The chandeliers of the Grand Monarch Hotel glittered like 1,000 cold stars suspended from the ceiling. Every crystal reflected wealth. The annual Hawthorne Foundation Gala was the kind of event where fortunes were measured in handshakes and whispered deals. Politicians, CEOs, and media moguls floated through the ballroom, wrapped in tailored tuxedos and couture gowns. Behind the champagne tower stood Elena Morales. Black uniform, hair neatly tied back, expression calm. She carried silver trays heavier than they looked and navigated the crowd with quiet precision. To the guests, she was invisible. To the hotel manager, she was reliable. To herself, she was something more, but that part she kept buried. At precisely 8:37, the ballroom doors opened wider, and a small ripple moved through the crowd. Victor Langford had arrived, tall, impeccable tuxedo, the youngest self-made billionaire in the city, owner of Langford Holdings, real estate, tech startups, private equity. He was known for two things: ruthless business instincts and a belief that weakness deserved humiliation. Victor. Donors called, gravitating toward him like planets to a sun. Elena approached with a tray of champagne flutes. Victor barely looked at her as he took one. Then his eyes flicked to her name tag. Elena, he read aloud, almost amused. Tell me, Elena, do you ever look around this room and wonder what it's like to matter? A few nearby guests chuckled. Elena held the tray steady. I try not to wonder about things I can build instead, sir. That answer caught a flicker of attention. But Victor smirked. Build? That's adorable. Let me guess, you're studying business at night, planning to overthrow Wall Street between shifts. More laughter. Heat rose to Elena's cheeks, but her voice remained even. Everyone starts somewhere. Victor leaned closer, lowering his tone but not enough to keep others from hearing. Yes, and most people stay exactly where they belong. The words landed harder than he realized. Because 5 years earlier, Elena had watched her father, owner of a small but promising construction firm, lose everything after a hostile takeover orchestrated by Langford Holdings. A takeover that exploited a temporary liquidity crisis and forced foreclosure within weeks. Her father had called it legal theft. He'd never financially recovered. The stress triggered a stroke that left him partially paralyzed. Victor didn't recognize her. To him, Morales Construction had been just another acquisition. To Elena, it had been her family's life. She gave a small nod. Enjoy your evening, Mr. Langford. He'd already turned away, but something had shifted. The humiliation wasn't new. She'd endured worse: condescending customers, entitled executives, whispers about her accent when she first started. What hurt wasn't his arrogance. It was the reminder: power protects itself, unless you learn how to use it. That night, after her shift ended, Elena didn't go straight home. She walked to a small apartment across town where her father sat in a recliner near the window. How was work? He asked, voice slower than it used to be. Busy, she said softly. She didn't tell him Victor Langford had mocked her. Instead, she opened her laptop. Because what Victor, and everyone else in that ballroom, didn't know was that Elena wasn't just a waitress. She had completed her MBA online, graduating top of her class. She had spent nights studying corporate law, mergers, financial structures. She had interned remotely for a regulatory compliance firm. She understood balance sheets the way musicians understand notes. And for 2 years, she had been quietly investing. Not recklessly, strategically. Langford Holdings had grown fast. Too fast. Rapid expansions into tech, over-leveraged real estate projects, aggressive debt financing. Victor loved risk. Elena loved patterns. And she had begun to see cracks. 3 weeks after the gala, Langford Holdings announced its newest venture, a luxury eco-city development on the waterfront. It required massive upfront capital. Investors were dazzled. Media called it visionary. Elena read the filings line by line. Environmental permits pending, short-term debt covering long-term assets, a subsidiary structured through shell partnerships, risk layered on risk. Victor believed confidence was the same as invincibility. Elena began making calls. Not dramatic ones, not threatening ones, professional ones. An old professor who now consulted for regulatory boards. A former classmate working in investigative journalism. A compliance officer she had once assisted on a research project. She didn't fabricate anything. She simply asked the right questions and provided publicly available data that most people were too dazzled to examine. Within a month, whispers began. Was Langford overextended? Were environmental assessments rushed? Why were 3 offshore entities tied to the waterfront project registered to the same holding address? Victor dismissed it as jealousy. At a board meeting, he laughed. Small minds trying to slow us down. But then the first real blow landed. A regulatory audit was announced into zoning irregularities. Stock prices dipped, just slightly. Victor assured investors it was routine. Meanwhile, Elena continued working her shifts, carrying trays beneath crystal chandeliers. She never mentioned Langford, but late at night, she tracked market movements. She began shorting specific segments of Langford's overvalued holdings through perfectly legal channels. Calculated, precise. When the investigative article finally dropped, it wasn't explosive. It was meticulous. It questioned debt exposure. It cited unnamed insiders concerned about aggressive accounting practices. It mentioned possible environmental noncompliance. Investors panicked, not because of proof of fraud, but because uncertainty is poison to markets. Langford Holdings stock dropped 18% in a single week. Victor raged. Find out who's behind this, he demanded his legal team. They found nothing illegal, because Elena had broken no laws. She had simply illuminated truth. The real unraveling began when a major partner withdrew funding from the Eco City project, citing reputational risk. Without that capital injection, Langford had to refinance at punishing interest rates. Credit agencies downgraded outlook projections. Another 12% drop. Board members began asking harder questions. Victor, for the first time in years, felt pressure. He attended the next gala thinner, jaw tighter. Elena was there again. This time, when he saw her, recognition flickered, not of who she was, but of something unsettling. You, he said quietly as she offered champagne. Yes, Mr. Langford. He studied her face. Have we met before? Only briefly, she replied. He searched her expression for mockery. There was none, just calm. You think this is funny? He snapped suddenly, gesturing vaguely, as if she controlled the invisible storm gathering around him. I think actions have consequences, she said gently. He stiffened. You have no idea how the real world works. Her eyes held his. I think I do. 2 months later, Langford Holdings faced a liquidity crisis. Nothing criminal, nothing sensational, just too much risk colliding with too little trust. Investors demanded restructuring. The board voted to remove Victor as CEO, temporarily, to stabilize confidence. Temporarily became indefinitely. The empire didn't vanish overnight. But it fractured. Assets sold. Projects halted. Victor's personal net worth shrank by billions on paper. The man who once mocked a waitress for not mattering found himself excluded from the very rooms he once dominated. One rainy afternoon, he walked into a small downtown bank for a private meeting. Elena was already there, not in a waitress uniform. In a tailored navy suit. Across the table sat the bank's executive committee. Elena Morales, the chairman said warmly, our newest strategic investment partner. Victor froze. Recognition struck like lightning. Morales, he whispered. She nodded once. My father sends his regards. Color drained from his face. You orchestrated this. She shook her head. No, you did. I just paid attention. The chairman cleared his throat. Ms. Morales has acquired significant positions in several distressed assets formerly under Langford Holdings. She's proposing a restructuring plan that preserves jobs and corrects compliance issues. Victor stared at her, 1,000 emotions warring behind his eyes: anger, disbelief, humiliation. You were a waitress. I was working, she corrected softly. There's a difference. Silence stretched. For the first time, Victor saw what he had refused to see in anyone beneath him: intelligence without ego, strength without cruelty. You destroyed me, he said quietly. Elena's voice did not waver. No, I stopped you from destroying others. The restructuring went forward. Jobs were saved. The Eco City project was redesigned with genuine environmental oversight. Morales Infrastructure Group was born from the ashes of her father's old company, backed by investors who valued sustainability over spectacle. Elena visited her father the evening the final papers were signed. We're rebuilding, she told him, tears in her eyes. He squeezed her hand with limited strength but immense pride. Meanwhile, Victor faced something he had never confronted before: irrelevance. Invitations stopped coming. Former allies avoided eye contact. He could have fought, could have lashed out. Instead, something unexpected happened. Humility crept in. Months later, he requested a meeting with Elena. This time, he waited in her office lobby. When she stepped out, composed and confident, he stood. "I came to apologize," he said. She studied him carefully. "For underestimating you," he continued. "For thinking money made me superior." She let the silence sit between them. "Apologies don't rebuild character," she said at last. "But they can start." He nodded. "I don't expect forgiveness." "That's good," she replied. "Because this was never about revenge." He looked confused. "It was about balance," she clarified. "Power without empathy collapses." Every time, he left quieter than he'd arrived. Years later, business schools would analyze the Langford collapse as a case study in overleveraged expansion and reputational risk. They would also study the rise of Morales infrastructure as a model of ethical restructuring. But in quiet moments, Elena would remember the ballroom, the laughter, the word nobody, and she would smile. Not because she had destroyed an empire, but because she had proven something far more important. No one is just anything. Not just a waitress, not just a dreamer, not just a small business owner. Every person carries unseen potential. Victor lost billions, but he gained perspective. Elena gained justice, but more importantly, she kept her integrity. So if you've ever been underestimated, if someone has looked at your current position and decided that defines your future, remember this story. Titles fade, wealth shifts, but discipline, patience, and quiet determination, those build legacies. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength waiting to rise, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because the world may not always see your worth immediately, but when it does, make sure you're ready. And never let anyone convince you that you don't matter.